March 24th, 2015, Bloodborne has finally hit the store's shelves, and as well as the digital outlet of your said choice. The game's story, and as well as theme, is based off a 18th century Gothic-style city named Yharnam, which is in ruins. Now, over the years, many travelers have basically went to this city to try to find some remedy to cure their afflictions. However, a lot of things have went bad from that. So let me begin. Basically, you are named by default a hunter, which is supposed to go out and kill these nasty monsters that are pretty much plaguing the city. Now, this is not no new thing. The city's been going through this epidemic for quite some time. So over the years, many hunters have came and gone, having contracts, or by default, by good nature or goodwill, or by insanity, have basically gone out and tried to kill these said humanoid wolves, or anything else in between. The game's monsters vary from crazed villagers to humanoid werewolves, even down to other hunters, including and not limited to other players if you choose to play online and, well, dabble a little bit with the PvP, or if some woman rings a freaking bell and these motherfuckers come out of the woodwork. The monsters all look pretty great, featuring flair from H.P. Lovecraft, a little bit of Bram Stoker, even a lot of old school horror movies, or survival movies, or whatever you wish to call them nowadays. They pretty much have that vibe to them. Now, each monster has their own style of maneuver, or in this case, they can either run into like a frantic train out of hell, or even slow-paced and calculated, where they have pretty decent AI to them. Now, of course, there's also AI hunters that are around the game that you can practically encounter. Now, usually, most of the NPCs will attack you if you attack them, but there's also monsters that are patiently waiting throughout the world to kick your ass. And those monsters, of course, are called some of the bosses in the game. Now, the bosses in this game are roughly around 16 or so, if I counted correctly from playing through. And most of these monsters can be encountered through the Chalice dungeons, or even through the normal game, which that, of course, is said. Now, most of these characters, or a couple of them at least anyway, are secret. You have to find them just by simply looking through every nook and cranny. Otherwise, there's a straight path, narrow way to get to these said monsters, which requires a lot of finesse, calculation, as well as timing. Or you can just run through it like I did, and I usually ran like I was freaking the Bionic Man because I just did not want to deal with it. Now, the character creation in this game is also pretty detailed. It's not amazingly detailed, but it gives you enough tools to be able to craft and make your character almost as how much you would like how it to look. You can make it look a little bit cartoonish or make it look serious as possible. However, it's not truly super duper detailed. It does have some limitations, but other than that, it's actually pretty cool to use. I ended up making a character with some glasses, and other than that, I usually, for the majority of the game, wore the hunter's helmet, so that way it covered my face with a veil, and it just looked kind of cool. Now, of course, I have the Bone Ash set, and I won the game. That's just it. I just won the game over. We could all go home now. Not really. The AI, for the most part, holds up pretty well. You'll encounter certain enemies that are also called hunters that have almost human-like technique in them, meaning it's kind of like you're fighting someone who's pretty decently skilled in PvP as well, and they pretty much can hold up a pretty good fight against you. Now, some of the monsters, on the other hand, have some good fight in them, but at the same time, there's a certain mechanic to them which kind of sucks, where they reset. It's not their HP that resets, it's their mechanic where they chase you resets. Say, for example, a monster sitting stationary looking at a wall, or just sitting around looking derp. Or you have a couple of groups of monsters, or a specific monster just stationarily walking around in a patrol formation, and if they notice you, they give chase. But after a while, they go, you know, this guy isn't really worth it. I'm going back doing what I was doing. I'm going to pick my asshole on this path here. And that's pretty much what happens, which it kind of a little bit takes away from the atmosphere. But if in terms of survival, if you're trying to get away from them, it isn't so bad. But again, I'm really hoping it would still chase me anyway. I mean, it kind of, again, would add to the whole nightmarish survival technique that they're trying to provide for this game. Items in this game play a pretty simple role. You have mostly weapons you get from key events, as well as drops, or from certain bosses, of course. These drops being redeemable badges, which you go to an NPC, which is little guys hanging around inside of a jacuzzi, and you basically talk to them, get your items, and then you just reap the benefits. This, of course, is examples of weapons and, of course, armor, which have certain stats. Picking the right armor is up to you. It's mostly just either you want them cosmetics or if you want them for certain specific stats, which I personally go for the Bone Ash because it has really good defense and pretty decent rolls of said stats for different elements. Isn't the strongest or the best armor, but you get my point. But anyway, basically the other compound of this game is runes. Runes are used to equip to your character. Now you can equip 3 of these said runes at a time, and they give you bonus stats such as bonus stamina like 15%, or they give you more drops for, you know, experience points, or they give you more blood vials to be able to replenish your HP. I mean, again, it plays stuff like that, or it gives you more blood bullets, which you can use those to cast certain spells, which, interestingly enough, magic is not necessarily a hyper deep focus in this game. There's barely anything that would be consistent of a magic spell. There's like a few, I'm counting them at the back of my head, about 6 or so items that you use that require blood bullets that are not guns. Like you can cast a old hunter bone to basically be able to move a little bit quicker or teleport around a little bit. You know, you got abilities where you can howl and you can knock enemies back, stuff like that. You know, you get these little kind of spells. Then otherwise you got, for instead of being able to cast spells, guns, which guns in this game are not completely useful. I mean, some people probably could find some use out of it, who really knows, but at least in my experience with the game, the guns didn't quite feel like they're up to umph. I mean, probably if I was able to level them fully, maybe they might do some damage, but they weren't doing anything that was adequate enough for me to say that they were even worth a damn. I basically equipped the big cannon that you would get a little bit during into the game, and I just used it as cosmetic. Other than that, I just used my weapon as a heavy base damage, or I pretty much used my switch weapon, or my trick weapon, which was an axe for a while, and I just used it two-handed and just ran around and went ham. I mean, I did not ever really use the gun once, and it didn't quite feel crucial for any situation for me. Otherwise, what it's really used for is tactics for just stun-locking people or stopping people from casting abilities or attacking you generally. I mean, in PvP, maybe this might be a lot more essential to use, but I don't know. I just never found anything that useful or any essentially required me to have to use the gun too often, so I ended up just throwing it aside or whatever else. Other than that, you get a joke shield, which is only shield in the game, which is like this wooden shield, which, again, it's just there for a joke. And then you also got a torch, which is pretty useful for dark areas. You got a hand torch, which you can put it to your hip and get some illumination, but otherwise the torch you get in the game gives you a lot of illumination for the area. And then you get basically weapons. Now, the weapons are called trick weapons, as I just stated before. Now, all of them have their own alternate abilities, such as the axe can turn into a great axe, which is pretty wild. They also have a great sword, which is also a sword. They got a hammer, which is also a sword. You got a spear that turns into like a gun lance, which is pretty cool. I mean, again, they have all kinds of crazy-ass weapons in here. Not a lot, but I guess enough to, I guess, satisfy somebody who's grinding a specific weapon they like. You know, for example, I bought the wheel, and it was actually a pretty cool little item. It doesn't have a lot of range to it, but you could actually spin it, and when you spin it, it gives it a strong buff at the exchange of draining your life a little bit. So it's advisable, if you do end up wanting to use that wheel weapon, is to make sure your life is pretty high. And you can be able to absorb the said gear. Now, stats also play an interesting role in this game too, where you have a minimum requirement for certain weapons, and as well as certain weapons require to have certain high stats, for example arcane, to be able to use elemental or off stats for bonus damage. Now, it plays a crucial role for the the end game, so it's advisable to at least probably pump like 30 or something into arcane if you're using like the greatsword or whatever else it has like elemental properties. That's at least what I have uncovered during that said segment for the weapons, or at least for that. Now, armor, it's mostly, or some of it is mostly cosmetic or just for play. I don't know. I mean, some of the stats on it aren't so good, nor they aren't so bad. I've usually focused myself on using heavy armor because enemies usually try to get up close and personal and kiss me on the cheek. So, again, armor is decently long when it comes to a list-wise of being able to find a bunch of that. But as for weapons and range weapons, not so much, not a lot. but I guess it's enough because of the fact you have to run about and grind and find shards, which shards in this game allow you to level up your weapons and whatever else. So again, that plays a crucial part in that. I'm assuming that it's like level plus 10 to maximize your weapons in this game. That's at least from my experience so far, I've noticed. Other than that, I mean, you got abilities and all that, which play a crucial part to set items once you put them into your character, such as you can give yourself like bonus damage or whatever else when you eat a beast blood bullet or pellet, excuse me. But other than that, I mean, items do their job. I mean, they're not incredibly useless. I mean, there's some sort of tactic or some sort of measure you can use for each weapon or each item in this game. But as far as I was concerned, I usually stuck to close range attacking or combat, and I just kept myself, tanky. So I found a build, I found the right items, and it all worked out quite well. So it was pretty nice to find a game that actually so far built or allowed me to build something I wanted to do with the character, and it was easy to access, easy to use all these set items, and it wasn't too impossible to understand anything that was going on. The game practically handles a lot like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, or Super Metroid, or Metroid, or any other game you could probably throw into the suggestion box. It has a lot of backtracking involved, where you have to find keys, you have to find certain things to make things work and progress forward. So it has a little bit of an adventure mode built into the game, where you have to find keys, kind of like hey, did in Resident Evil. And again, it has this very familiar atmosphere to it, where you have to do certain things to make other things work. Like, for example, you can't get further unless you kill Boss A and Boss B to unlock Boss C and Boss D, and then if you kill Boss D, you can't unlock this scenario, or lather and repeat. It depends on how you progress with the game. There's also timed events in the game where if you don't quite do those events that time and there, you're not going to be able to do them, which some people say, that sucks, that isn't fair. Then just do those events at that time. Well, I didn't know. Well, you'll know the next playthrough. Speaking of next playthroughs, apparently it's not really that eventful to do New Games Plus, because you don't really get too much out of it. Like, I've heard a couple of complaints about this. I've seen it myself. It just isn't really worth it to continue playing a New Game Plus. I mean, that's disappointing. Well, that's where one mechanic of the game shines. At least one thing to keep you playing past the 45 hours, which is the total time I've played through the entire game, and the average grade of people being able to averagely pass through the entire game. And that, of course, is the Chalice dungeons. Chalice dungeons are mostly a randomly generated dungeon that gives you drops like bloodstones and runes and whatever else. I think no, they don't give you runes. I take that back. They basically give you mostly bloodstones that allow you to socket into your weapons and make you stronger, which is cool. There's also a few characters inside the dungeon that give you exclusive armor, which are full sets, redeemable full sets rather, that will basically give you new fancy swag, such as the Bone Ash set, which I got recently within the said Chalice dungeon. Now, the dungeons vary from pretty simple, very straightforward enemies to really complex and enemies you've probably never seen without the normal gameplay experience. So, the dungeons have their own unique bosses, unique areas, and as well as unique enemies involved. So, it's practically a new experience almost every time you play it. Now, the co-op in this game also played a backseat slightly for me, because I mostly played the game by myself. Unfortunately, me and my friend Bill were trying to play online with a co-op mode with the Chalice dungeon, and sadly, me and him were not able to do so. I looked up online to see if there was any sort of some sort of cure to fix this issue, and it was apparently a very common issue where not a lot of people are able to play online together inside the dungeons, which I think personally, if you're able to enter a dungeon with somebody via connecting through their passcode, you should be able to automatically see the person and just be able to play with them anyway. You don't need no stinking bells. You can just jump right in with those people and just play with them directly. And that's, of course, where the game kind of falls short with the slight bugs and issues along the way. It's not a major problem. I mean, yes, this is a core mechanic that should be addressed, but there's other bugs I'm referring to that were kind of buggy, but not a big deal. It's going to break the game. There's a progression bug, which I can't remember what the hell exactly what involves it or pertains to. But Oh, that's what it was. It was a Forbidden Forest where if you go in the Forbidden Forest and use the support bell, you basically, some sort of progression gets bugged, or you can't go into a certain area and progress with the game. So, unfortunately, you cannot help people if you like to help people when it comes to co-op in that specific area. So, if you're looking for help in the Forbidden Forest, and people are aware of that said bug, you're not going to get any help, so you're on your own. But other than that, gameplay is pretty smooth. It's a lot quicker than the original Bloodborne, the said Dark Souls series, and as well as Demon Souls. It has a lot more fluid nature to it. It plays great, and you pretty much play a gamble with your stamina bar, so it's practically the most important stat I think in this game is stamina. The reason why is that you move fast to get the hell out of the way from dodging enemies, as well as you swing, and that costs stamina. So stamina is the most precious mechanic in the game for yourself. If you disagree, whatever, but it's the most precious thing in the game next to you staying alive. So that's my opinion on the gameplay. It's top notch. The bugs are a bummer, but they can get fixed. So let's go over to my final opinion of the game. This game's been produced since 2012. And they pretty much picked this as an exclusive title for the PlayStation 4. Now, I would say it's not worth picking up a console for specifically. However, it's still a really well-made game. It has great music, great atmosphere, all the characters, the lore that you look and research and just study around the area, and it tells it all very well. It's sort of like you're interacting inside of a play that's ongoing. The game itself is just continuous, where you keep on playing it until the end. There's no distractions other than a few cutscenes here and there, which are not very long at all, and they give you just enough to understand what exactly is going on before you. Now, the game is not for beginners, people who are very laid back when it comes to video games. It's just not. It's for folks who like a challenge. Once you learn how to play the mechanics, get them down to a science, it becomes very fun. It becomes addicting. Especially with modes such as Chalice dungeons, which are kind of like Binding of Isaac a little bit. And they pretty much randomize some enemies in there, and they throw them at you all at once. All of them have specific elements such as fire or poison or whatever else. It adds a nice depth of variety if you're getting kind of bored with beating the game over and over. So you can just go do some challenges with the chalices and get some runes and just have a good old time with that. But other than that, the game, for average of 45 hours on total, except minus any sort of Chalice dungeon runs or anything like that, the game's well worth its money and admission. But if you don't own a PS4, it's obviously simple. You don't need the game. But if you do own a PS4 and want to play something that's going to challenge you, keep you on your edge of your feet, and have a great gameplay experience, then definitely pick up Bloodborne. I would pretty much go as bold as to say this is definitely a Game of the Year contender. It just has all the characteristics of being an even better game in the future to come. You're asking me why in the future time to come? Because once all the bugs and all the issues get smoothed out a little bit more, the game will play flawlessly. Besides a few hiccups with said lag or anything else, because yes, there is lag in certain areas. I'll say school and a certain classroom. I'll say that to a couple people who have played the game through, because they're probably going to challenge like, no, the game never lagged once. Because these people are probably using SSD drives, cough cough. But no, basically these said folks will know what I'm talking about with school and classroom. There's a certain area gets laggy. There's also a campfire area in the Forbidden Forest that, again, gets very laggy. Again, they'll know what the hell I'm talking about. They're like, oh yeah, those parts were kind of laggy. But it wasn't a game-breaking issue. It was just kind of choppy and kind of laggy at those points. The game runs at a smooth 1080p and 30 frames per second, which is not a huge deal. I mean, I don't really care if it's 60 frames or not. It does not quite bother me. The game played fine enough for me to enjoy. So, with that bared in mind, this game, in my opinion, is a Game of the Year. All I can say about it. But yeah, you have a PS4, want to play something new? Get Bloodborne. Take it easy.